diving instructor searching for a missing diver became trapped in a narrow rock crevice, unable to move. Just as he was about to suffocate, his teammate pulled him free, giving him a second chance at life. The moment he escaped, he swam desperately toward the cave entrance. But when he finally surfaced, everyone at the scene was stunned. His abdomen had swollen to the size of a woman 9 months pregnant, looking as if it could burst at any moment. And this is the story we're covering today: the Jacobs Well diving incident in the United States. Jacobs Well is located in the northwestern part of Hays County. It is a natural artesian spring with an opening approximately 4 meters, 13 feet, in diameter. Renowned for its crystal clear, sapphire blue water, it is often referred to as the Blue Sapphire of Texas. Although the surface appears calm and peaceful, beneath the water lies an extremely complex limestone cave system. The cave is primarily composed of 5 chambers, with the passage connecting the 3rd and 4th chambers being the most dangerous. Known as the birth canal, it is only about 50 centimeters, 20 inches wide, so narrow that a single diver can barely squeeze through. Once the water is disturbed, fine silt from the cave floor quickly fills the passage, reducing visibility to nearly zero. At the time, Jacobs Well was open to anyone holding an open water diver certification. However, the 4th chamber had never been successfully explored by any human diver. In September 1979, a diving club organized a weekend trip to Jacobs Well. The plan was simple: explore the 3 chambers that had already been mapped. Club leaders made one rule absolutely clear: no one was to attempt entry into the unexplored 4th chamber. But to 2 young club members, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like an invitation. They were 19-year-old Kent Maupin and 20-year-old Mark Brashear. Late that night, they persuaded 21-year-old Joe Moyer to join them, and the 3 secretly entered Jacobs Well. At first, they followed an existing guideline and descended slowly. The first chamber was about 7.6 meters, 25 feet, deep and relatively spacious. During the day, sunlight could reach all the way to the bottom. They then continued down to the second chamber at roughly 16.8 meters, 55 feet. This was the most complex section of Jacobs Well, filled with branching passages and dead ends known as false chimneys. One wrong turn could easily leave a diver hopelessly lost. After successfully passing through the second chamber, they reached the 3rd chamber at a depth of about 23 meters, 75 feet. Here, the water pressure was already 3 times greater than at the surface, a depth where nitrogen narcosis commonly occurs. But Kent and his friends had no idea. At the far end of the 3rd chamber, they finally saw the legendary passage known as the birth canal. Kent and Mark were thrilled. They had found the entrance to the 4th chamber. Joe immediately warned them. The passage looked extremely unstable, and everything beyond it was completely unknown. A serious accident could happen at any moment, but Kent had already made up his mind. "Wait here," he told Joe. "We'll go take a look. We'll be back in 10 minutes. With that, he turned sideways and squeezed into the narrow passage. Mark followed close behind. Slowly, the 2 disappeared from Joe's sight. Joe remained alone in the 3rd chamber. Minute after minute passed. He checked his pressure gauge repeatedly. The air in his tank was dropping fast. He knew Kent and Mark were diving even deeper than he was, meaning their air consumption would be even greater. Under ideal conditions, their tanks could probably last no more than 20 minutes. But 20 minutes came and went. They still hadn't returned. Joe banged hard on his scuba tank, hoping they would hear him and respond. Nothing. The passage remained silent. No lights, no sounds, no movement. Joe knew he could not wait any longer. His own air supply was running low. He left his dive light at the entrance to the passage as a marker and began a slow ascent. Every few meters he stopped to decompress, avoiding the dangers of surfacing too quickly. Although he had never received formal cave diving training, his open water diving experience allowed him to make a cautious ascent. Meanwhile, there was still no sign of Kent or Mark. By then, Joe feared the worst. After reaching the surface, he immediately told the others what had happened underwater. Everyone was stunned. Emergency services were called at once. The rescue team arrived at the site at around 3 a.m. Leading the operation was Don Dibble, one of the most respected cave diving rescue specialists of the time. He had participated in multiple rescue missions at Jacobs Well and was highly experienced in cave diving hazards and emergency response. Based on Joe's account and the conditions at the scene, Don decided to send 2 divers down first to assess the situation. When they returned, the news was grim. The passage was almost completely blocked by fallen rocks. There was virtually no way through. Even worse, the slope of loose debris at the bottom of the cave was extremely steep and unstable, meaning another collapse could occur at any moment. After gathering all available information, Don and his partner, Calvin Turner, began their descent. When they reached the 3rd chamber, they found that the birth canal had been reduced to a tiny opening. Don checked his pressure gauge. Satisfied that he still had enough air, he carefully squeezed into the narrow gap and slowly worked his way forward. Then disaster struck. A cloud of silt suddenly surged through the passage with the current. In an instant, Don's vision disappeared into complete darkness. But that wasn't the worst part. Amid the confusion, he became wedged inside the narrow passage. He couldn't move, not forward, not backward. His breathing rate skyrocketed. And in cave diving, panic means one thing: faster air consumption. Don quickly realized he might not make it out alive. Accepting what seemed inevitable, he decided he wanted to die as calmly as possible. There were only two ways it could end. Either water would enter through his nose, or he would deliberately swallow it. He rejected the first option. The sensation would trigger panic, making his final moments even more terrifying. Instead, he took several deep breaths, removed his regulator from his mouth, and began gulping down water. Almost immediately, he felt dizzy and disoriented. It was as if death itself was waiting just beyond the darkness. Then, without warning, he felt a powerful force pulling him backward. Someone had grabbed him. In the next moment, he was dragged free from the crack. A regulator was shoved back into his mouth. Don inhaled as hard as he could. The rush of air filled his lungs. And in that instant, he felt as though he had been brought back from the dead. The two divers immediately turned back toward the exit. But during the ascent, a new danger emerged. As pressure decreased, the gas in Don's body expanded rapidly. He tried to burp to release the trapped air, but he couldn't. The gas kept expanding, causing him unbearable pain. His abdomen began to swell quickly. By the time Don reached the surface, his stomach had expanded to the size of a woman 9 months pregnant. He let out a piercing scream of agony. Everyone on the scene was stunned into silence. He was immediately rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. Doctors found that the pressure had caused a rupture in his stomach wall. Fortunately, surgery managed to save his life. Don's injury brought the rescue operation to a halt. No one was willing to risk entering that deadly passage again. Several days later, with the consent of the victims' families, authorities installed a heavy metal grate at the entrance to the birth canal. The purpose was to prevent more divers from recklessly entering the passage. However, just 6 months later, the metal grate had been completely removed. In its place, a plastic board had been left behind, bearing a defiant message: "You can't stop us." In 1991, 12 years after the accident, a group of cave diving enthusiasts entered the fourth chamber. On the ceiling of the chamber, they discovered Mark's remains. But there was still no sign of Kent. In 2000, an elite team organized by the National Speleological Society Cave Diving Section, NSSCDS, conducted a comprehensive geological survey of Jacob's Well. They successfully passed through the fourth chamber. But as they prepared to enter the fifth chamber, an area never before explored by humans, they made a grim discovery. Kent's remains were found there. His body was buried beneath a thick layer of silt. Scattered beside him were his dive light and air cylinder. It was later reconstructed that Kent and Mark had indeed made it into the fourth chamber. But when they attempted to return, they discovered that the birth canal passage had become blocked. In his final moments, Mark swam toward the ceiling of the chamber, likely searching for higher air. Of course, there is no breathable air in an underwater cave. This was most likely a hallucination caused by nitrogen narcosis. He ultimately died when his air supply was exhausted. Kent, on the other hand, tried to find another way out. He continued deeper into the cave system in search of an alternative route. From this, it is inferred that he struggled for some time in the deeper sections of the system before also running out of air and dying. Today, Jacob's Well is permanently sealed with a far more robust metal barrier. Although some thrill-seekers still attempt to breach it, no officially recorded fatalities have occurred there since 1984.